topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's that time of the week. Super excited to be here with you. And I want to thank each and every one of you who got our books, The Entrepreneur's Garden, Expert to Influencer, and many, many more. And also, I've got a new book coming in. So I'm working on that. Super excited about that. And the reason I am so grateful to each and every one of you who got our books is because you are part of our supporting entrepreneurs all across the globe through kiva.org, because partial profits from our book sales go to supporting Kiva. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And as always, I'm going to invite you to share 1 hour of your time every month with no strings attached and help somebody out. Because not only we are going in the season of giving, also, what if we kept that giving spirit throughout the year? So give that 1 hour with no strings attached and help somebody out. And for those of you who don't know me, I help people build a narrative that they're confident in at the mindset level, and also help them build authority assets so they can have an executive presence if they're in the corporate world, or they can be perceived as a trusted leader in their niche if they're an entrepreneur. So let's get started. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you much, Divya. I'm excited to be here.
So how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well.
Well,
Actually, I recently published my debut novel, and it's getting excellent reviews on Amazon. And I'm not only grateful, but in a way I'm shocked, because I don't know any writer that thinks that their work is really good. And I'm one of those who incredibly insecure people who, when it comes to writing. So I'm very good. I just got a huge boost in terms of that. So,
well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And of course, we'll be touching and getting to know more about your book at the end of the show. So looking forward to that. So Nancy, do you recall any moment from your childhood that stands out for you even today?
I think the moment in my childhood that I really remember most is when I was about 5 years old. Highlights magazine had an article, and I'm 75. So that was 70 years ago. And I still remember it like it was yesterday. You were supposed to write this story, a fictional story, obviously, at 5, and you could win a pony. And I was absolutely sure I was going to win a pony. And my older brother, who's frankly a genius, helped me with some punctuation. I wrote the story, but he helped me. And he actually looked at me and he said, "You actually wrote this?" I said, Yeah, Michael, I wrote it. He said, "Well, it's actually good." And he never told me anything was good. So that was really a boost. So I gave it to my mother and I asked her to mail it in. And then a week later, I started sitting out on the front porch, waiting for them to pull up with my pony. And I waited and waited, and every day I'd come out, after whatever little kindergarten school I was in, And I wait and wait and wait until dark. And, my mother is first generation German, and she was a very strict woman. And so if you weren't at the dinner table at 5:30, I mean, that was a big problem. She never came out, never yelled at me. Finally, one time my father came out, pulled me around the waist, lifted me up, and he turned me to him. So we were eyeball to eyeball, and he said, "Nance, the pony's not coming. You have to get over it." So years later, if you can believe it, my mother confessed she never sent it in.
Oh.
So
Probably because they didn't want the pony.
well, that's what my brother said. I'm the middle of 7 kids, and my mother apparently had confessed it to someone else and said when she read it, she thought, "This is so good. I don't want a pony."
Where was she going to house the pony? Oh, the tales of the childhood. That's such a beautiful story. And so as you grew up, and I gotta tell you, you look great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I have a confession to make. I did litigation. I did a lot of divorce litigation. And I had one opposing counsel who he really hated it. He hated being beaten by a woman. It was just so hard for him that a woman, in those days, I had long blonde hair, I was quite fit, and he hated it. And I came to court one day and he said, "Boy, you look really tired. What, did you have a long night? Were you up worrying about me, like beating you?" And so anyway, I had a client who was a dermatologist. So I called him and I said, "I do agree. I look tired. What can you do?" So he did laser on me. And ever since then, I mean, I was 55. I have laser every 2 years. I highly recommend it for all women. It's non-invasive and it really brightens your face. It makes you feel better about yourself. At least I feel that way.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So, apart from having interest in story writing as you grew up, which direction did your life take you?
Actually, when I was 13, 2 weeks before Christmas, my father was diagnosed with cancer. And this was in 1963. So those days, there was no intensive care, but he went into the hospital and he had surgery, and he was in the hospital for 3 months. And he was the sickest patients on the ward, it wasn't a ward, the hall, were closest to the nurse's station. And because I was, my father wanted me to go to the hospital, sit there and wait so that I could go home with my mother at night. He didn't want her driving at night alone. So the nurses had me running errands. I ran down to the emergency room to deliver blood. I went all over the hospital delivering pharmacy. I mean, can you imagine today having a 13-year-old in her little Catholic school uniform?
I am sure that it would be.
I don't think that would happen. But anyway, as a result of that, I really wanted to become a nurse. So that was a real pivotal point in my life. Up to that point, I wanted to be a teacher.
And then did you become a nurse?
Oh, yes. I became a critical care nurse. And yes, I worked in the emergency room and intensive care, depending upon what skills they needed. You need a different set of skills for emergency room as you do for intensive care. And if you're a certified critical care nurse, as I am, they teach you both skills so that if they need somebody, if they're short in intensive care, you get pulled up there. If they're short in the emergency room, you get pulled down there. So,
wow. Yeah. So how did you end up becoming a lawyer?
Well, that's another interesting story. I wrote a textbook. It was called Advanced Concepts in Clinical Nursing with some colleagues from the University of Pennsylvania. And it was published by J.B. Lippincott, and it was a mandatory textbook in most nursing schools throughout the United States. And the purpose of that book was to promote different protocols, to promote advanced patient care. And in the hospital that I was working in, I went to the administration and I showed them the book and I said, and I had this printout of what we could do in intensive care in the emergency room to improve patient care. And they, the administrator took it, smiled at me and said, yeah, we'll look at this. And like 3 weeks later, nothing happened. So I went back and she said, well, it has to go through committee and I'm not really sure it's too advanced for us. So anyway, the hospital had just hired a woman who was a nurse and had gone to law school to become an attorney to work in administration to prevent different malpractice possibilities in different departments of the hospital. So I saw her at lunch one day and I walked over to her and I asked her, I said, I have this book. It's nationally recognized. I'm actually getting royalties from it. I went to administration. I asked them to incorporate some of these protocols. It really would help patient care. And she looked at me and she said, they're not going to listen to you. You're a nurse. Become a lawyer. You'll have power. But that's what I did. I went to law school thinking that I'd go back into hospital administration. But, as I've heard you say and other of your guests say on your podcast that I've listened to, sometimes life gets in the way.
Mm-hmm. So do share. What happened? How did life get in the way? What
happened was I was hired. I was a judicial clerk for a year, which is almost like a master's degree in law. Clerkships are very competitive. And so I was very, very fortunate to get a very prestigious clerkship. So I clerked with a judge for a year and I was hired by a law firm to do defense malpractice. And the first day on my job, there were 75 files piled on my desk and my office was the size of a closet. And I went to the senior partner and I said, I really don't want to do divorce. I was hired to do malpractice. And he put his finger an inch from my nose and looked at me and said, you're never going to make it here. You do what we tell you to do. You're a woman and divorce is woman's work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So as I said, that's 1984.
And when was this? Like
1984. 1984.
Okay.
So as I said, I'm the middle of 7 children. So, all you have to tell me is I can't do something. So while I was doing defense malpractice, I became fairly successful in divorce. And because I had the litigation experience from doing malpractice work. So when they lost the contract to represent the physicians, because the physicians are not individually, they don't select their attorney. The insurance company that insures them against malpractice is the one that engages the company or the law firm rather to represent you. So they lost that contract, but I had all of this work to fall back on. So I left, opened my own law firm, and 32 years later, here I am, retired and happy.
Well, that's great. So let's review the time you spent as a critical nurse. What would you say, your life experiences that made you grow as a person?
I think as a critical care nurse, I really saw what the families go through and the impact of illness on family members and caretakers. And I also saw that sometimes the stress of a significant injury or a trauma in the emergency room could cause enormous tension as well as enormous love. And I found that it was a double-edged sword. I mean, many people, when you get married and you say in sickness and health, you're thinking of cold or the flu. You're not thinking of catastrophic injuries in an automobile accident or cancer or some other disability that renders the person that you were looking at a certain way, to change completely in terms of your perception and your expectations of your relationship. And I saw that firsthand. I saw people who were detached from the person that they were married to and were meant to help. And, sadly, I saw that a lot of that in my law practice in divorce. Too many times I saw women were diagnosed with breast cancer and their husbands would not be supportive, and not only not supportive, but they would be having affairs. And, it takes a lot to be a caregiver. I'm sorry, I have no idea what that is, an Amber Alert. In any event, that really helped me become far more empathetic with my domestic relations clients. And I think that attributed to my success.
And you brought up really a good point, empathy. And this goes over sickness and personal trauma, personal tragedies do happen. And sometimes, life throws a curveball at you. So let's kind of take a look at, so many times what happens is that employees, whether, or whether you're an entrepreneur, like, your clients are expecting you to be performing at full capacity and serving you to the best of your ability. And similarly, employers are also kind of thinking, yeah, you know what, my employee needs to come here. I'm paying them the money. They gotta do it. So tell us, since your experience with the divorce and all that, how does it impact people, and how could that relationship be changed, especially when your employees are going through divorces?
Well, I have to say that I represented towards the last 15 years of my practice, very high asset clients, most of which owned companies or were high level executives, and they were going through a divorce. And what you just said is absolutely true. It's not only the employees, and I've also represent many employees who really became close to losing their jobs over the stress of the breakup of the marriage and the family. So I saw it as both the entrepreneur, the person who's responsible for the employees, and the employee who's responsible to the employer to continue to perform. So with the employer who was going through a divorce, and actually in the case of both of them, I think what I've always done is, and I was actually asked several times to help employers deal with, how do we deal with our employees who are going through divorce? And I always emphasized the fact that it's much cheaper to counsel and support an employee than it is to replace them and retrain someone else, particularly if they were high functioning and you were happy with their performance before their divorce. And I would say it's like human resources has to deal with human remains of divorce. And people become profoundly affected by a divorce, whether it is a conscious or subconscious level. I don't know anyone who has not become profoundly affected by a divorce. And there is, given my nursing background and my interest in psychology, there are chemical reasons, hormonal reasons why people go through stages after a divorce.
Absolutely. So in your experience, what would you say are the stages? Because of HIPAA laws and because of privacy laws, employers just can't ask hey, what's going on in your personal life? So whether it's an employer themselves, so let's tackle it in two ways. So let's say, first, let's talk about a business leader or an employer, an entrepreneur who is going through this. how can they convey either to their clients or to their employees without giving or washing the dirty laundry in front of everyone that, listen, hey, I'm going through this tough time and I need support? Because so many times there's stigma about talking about that, oh, I'm feeling this pain, I'm feeling this emotion. So let's look at it from an employee or from an employer's perspective as well.
From an employer's perspective, what I think personally is that depending upon the level, and we call it post-breakup burnout, and there's a post-breakup impact on everyone who goes through a trauma, an emotional trauma, and basically in disengagement from someone you previously had a deep attachment to. That's just human nature. It is going to happen. You can deny it, but it's best to accept it. And I had a very successful gentleman who had started a business because he was working all the time. He was traveling. He really neglected his family and his wife, and she found someone else. It totally devastated him. He almost became catatonic. I mean, he just couldn't believe everything he had been working for and striving for to provide for his family. It was now gone because she basically, from his perspective, betrayed him. So what I recommended to him, because of the state he was in, not only, of course, did I recommend psychological counseling, but I highly recommended that what he do is call someone with whoever it was in his company that he completely trusted and felt competent to at least not take over, formally, but really act as a fiduciary for him with his employees. And I agree with you. Absolutely. The worst thing you can do, especially in a corporate or business setting, is to air your dirty laundry. Absolutely the worst possible thing you can do. In fact, there was an article, I believe it was in the New York Times, about the two similarities and two disparate the differences in the recent high conflict or high profile divorces of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Mackenzie Bezos, who is remarried and now divorcing after 2 years. Both of them are not airing any dirty laundry in the public. Absolutely quiet. Many people don't even know what's going on, and that is how you should do it. And both of those women are going through a great deal of stress, but they're handling it because they're getting psychological support and team support from whoever is around them. And what I recommend is that you get yourself into counseling, excuse me, if you're the employer, I beg your pardon. And what you should do is delegate some of your responsibilities to someone you truly trust. And your employees, if you have treated them appropriately, and in this case, he certainly did. I mean, he was very, very generous with his employees. They all knew something was going on. I mean, he lived in a small community, so everybody knew his wife was cheating except him. So it wasn't a shock. And it's rarely a shock to anyone when that happens because your personality does start to change. As far as an employee is concerned, there is nothing wrong, and there's no HIPAA law to prevent you as a manager of an employee who you see his head is down or her head is down, or they're acting distracted. They're not acting as focused as they normally are. Their assignments may be late, or their assignments not be as well done. And you go in, you close the door, or if they don't have a door on their office, you bring them into your office, you close the door, you sit down, you have a cup of coffee or whatever, and you say, look, I've noticed that you seem very distressed. You can say that. And you can offer, as an employer, you should absolutely offer employee assistance in terms of psychological assistance for an employee. It's worth the investment, 100% worth the investment. And the feedback that I've gotten from the clients that I've helped when their way through this morass is that it really did save them in the end a lot of money.
Absolutely. And now let's say you are the employer and you're going through divorce. How would you seek out the support of your team?
I think if I were the employer going through a divorce, I would be honest with my team. I would call them together and say, look, I'm not going to go into it, but you're going to hear rumors. Before you hear the wrong facts, I want to tell you the real facts. My wife and I are divorcing. That's the end of it. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know the circumstances. You don't need to go why, when, or where. I'm asking you to be as diligent as you can be to help me. I'm asking you to have my back. You know, life is a battle at best of times. And when you're in the battlefield, you need your comrades to have your back. And when you're going through a divorce, there are so many things happening within your body. You know, the cortisol is flowing, which makes you feel very different. Norepinephrine and epinephrine, adrenaline, you know, the adrenaline fight or flight is going through your. So many people who are going through divorce have flight of ideas and they think they're going crazy. They're not going crazy. They're human. And they're reacting to chemicals that are flowing through their body that affect their mood. They affect their concentration, their focus, and their emotions. You know, there are three stages of falling in love. The first stage is when you've got dopamine flowing around in your body, and dopamine activates the same area in the brain as cocaine does. So when you're falling in love, you're high on dopamine. You're feeling wonderful. You can take on the world. You're better at your work because, you know, when you're focusing on your work and not the person that you're interested in. The second stage has to do with serotonin and bonding and happiness. And the third stage, you start producing oxytocin, which is a bonding hormone that helps you put up with the person that you've chosen to the point where you can both raise a child. And that's Helen Fisher from Rutgers University, her research, which is all well recognized. There's also chemical stages when you detach from that person. You no longer have any dopamine, feelings of high. You know, every marriage has feelings of high and low, high and low. That's the normal course of marriage because it's the normal course of our bodies. Dopamine is secreted when we are exposed to novelty. So I have told so many people who come to my office and they want a divorce, and I take their history and they're basically still in love with their husbands or wife, but they feel flat, they feel bored, they feel as if, you know, the excitement and fizzle of life is out of them. I say, you don't need a divorce, you need a diversion. You need to stimulate that dopamine again. Do something novel. Take a trip, go to a new museum, go to a new restaurant. There are so many things people can do. And I know that's not the subject of this podcast, but there's so many things people can do to help themselves, you know, get out of that marital low. And, you know, frankly, they're the same things you can do if you're going through a divorce. The best thing you can do if you're going through a divorce is not lull in past, what you did wrong, beating yourself up over guilt. What if? That is the worst thing that you can do. That's only going to prolong the cortisol, which is not really a very healthy thing to have long term. You should train your mind and focus on new, novel things. All the things you now can experience that maybe you couldn't have experienced because of the relationship you were in. So I often recommend that to, you know, employers and employees.
Absolutely, some really relevant and great points. So since you're retired, let's just kind of take cumulative years of you being an attorney and through like tough, I would say one of the toughest things to do, right? Divorce attorney, because you're just kind of pulling pieces apart from a relationship that was, going strong once. So like, how did you deal with that? And what were some lessons from there?
As I said, I think the way to deal with a relationship that has ended and it's not a relationship you wanted to end is not to dwell on the past, not to dwell on the things that you feel that you might have done wrong, the things that you feel you could have done better. All the second guessing is a terrible way to try to get through that difficult time. The way you should get through it is by thinking of the future and planning the future. And the most important thing, if you're going through a divorce, is to budget and think about what you can afford, recognizing that you will definitely have a change in lifestyle. You're going to have a change in the standard of living. That is absolutely going to happen. I mean, it happens in every divorce. But if you properly budget and you plan for the future, that helps you stimulate dopamine. It helps you feel better about what is going to be happening to you. The other thing is that you should reach out to old friends who maybe you haven't reached out to because of your commitment to your family, your wife, and your job, and tell them honestly, hey, I'd like to meet you for a drink or a cup of coffee or whatever. And I'd really like to talk to you about what's going on. I feel like I need a friend.
No, that's some valuable advice. So tell us as to what made you write your book and what's your book about? Where is it available?
The name of my book is Around Which All Things Bend, and that is love. Love is the thing around which how far do we bend to give love? How far do we bend to get love? And there always comes a point at some point where we bend and bend and bend, and then we break. And as I said, that even happens in marriages where you're very much in love with your spouse, but you feel as if you're going to get brain damage banging your head against the wall because they're not really hearing what you say. They're not really being responsive to your needs. And so you break. And then, as I said, you can recalibrate, but sometimes you can't recalibrate. And the best thing to do in that circumstance is not live in a state of stress. We know, everyone knows at this point, stress is a killer. Stress causes heart disease, cancer, high blood pressure, stroke. I mean, you name it, the genesis is stress. So the book is about relationships, and it follows the course of a journey of a young man. Again, I'm sorry. He realizes that it's not about going out and trying to find the right person for a long-term marriage or love relationship. It's about being the right person in the relationship. And in the end of the book, if you go through his journey, and you can read the reviews on Amazon, you will go through the psychology of what it is to fall in love and what it is to realize what you need to do when you can't bend any longer in a relationship and it's time to get out. And there's a happily ever after, of course. It's sort of a romance.
Well, of course, in stories, we definitely need happily ever after. So if our audience wants to connect with you, where they can connect, and anything else you'd like to share about yourself?
Yes, I would love for them to go to my website, Nancy, Nancy, Perpall, PERPALL.com. My website has a lot of blogs about many of the things we've talked about today. And there is a blog about being an employee during a relationship, during a relationship breakup, whether it's a divorce or whether you were living together with someone and now you've broken up, whether you were dating somebody and you really had your heart set on becoming engaged and this person was going to be my life partner. There are many combinations of situations where people go through breakups, whether it's a friendship, a romantic or intimate relationship, and what happens to you and what you can do. And I have gotten fantastic feedback from all over about these blogs and how they've been shared, and people really enjoy them. And I enjoy writing them. It's my passion. After spending so many years taking apart marriages, it's my passion in retirement to help people keep their marriages and relationships together. And that's what around which all things bend is. And I have a book coming out in 2023. It's called The Malnourished Marriage: 5 Essential Emotional Nutrients for a Healthy Relationship. Excuse me. In any event, that actually, there are a number of blogs that describe that on my website, and I highly recommend it for people. The book is available on Amazon. Obviously, that's where the reviews are.
Well, thank you for joining us, Nancy, and sharing your experiences. And thank you, listeners, for joining in. So appreciate you, because without you, the show would not be possible. And thank you, Juan.
Thank you so much.
So we will be seeing you. Absolutely. We will be seeing you next week. Be well and take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.